Hey, it's Mike. Let's talk a little bit about the clock. So I've got a new ensemble here. We'll go in, get rid of this stuff we won't need. Drag our outputs out of the way. And let's drop in a clock. That's the 100 clock. Now, on the 100 clock, we have a switch here which says either clock or MIDI. This is used if you have, if you're doing just a patch and you want the clock to start and stop with gates. Okay, this is a 1/96th MIDI style clock. So it keeps MIDI time, but it does it in a modular way. So instead of being, like quarter note pulses, this is 1/96th note pulses that come out of this clock. So it allows you to keep in sync with a DAW. Down here we have volt per octave and voltage offset. On the clock, basically what this is an old school voltage processor. This is quantized to single volts, which in the modular world equate to octaves, and then this is quantized to single notes. If you can see down here at the bottom, you can actually see what note you're creating. So like here we have an E4, so 4 volts plus this equals E4. Now on the underside of the clock, we have a clock output, which is that 1/96th pulse. We have a reset output. Now, reset is a 1 if the clock is running, and it's a 0 if it's not running. And then we have the volt per octave output for the old school voltage processor. Now, also on this, we have a volt per octave in and something called CC. Volt per octave in, that's pretty easy. Basically, that overrides the old school voltage processor. Now, CC is used when you're using the MIDI in. So if we come down under the RC1 section right now, and we do MIDI, and we go to the MIDI in, you'll notice that there is a CC out on the MIDI in. So basically you connect this up, and then you connect the volt per octave up out of there. Volt per octave is passed through to this output. And now, when you play a key and you have this set to MIDI, the clock starts and stops when you play a key. This is handy for syncing LFOs, starting and stopping sequences, all from MIDI key press. So we're not going to talk that much about that right now. Let's get into the next part, and we'll do that with the 9608 sequencer. Little 8-step sequencer, fairly simple. Now you'll notice we have a clock input, so that comes in from here, and we have a reset input, which comes in from this clock. Now we also have a pulse here. This is for those of you who would prefer to use old school, just regular pulse-based clocking, so you can take any pulse signal and connect it into that, and it will act as a clock, such as the pulse output from an LFO. For right now, we're just going to take our clock signal and our reset signal in. Now this isn't much fun unless it's going to make some noise. So let's just drop in a synth mod, and we'll just use the semi-modular. Now, when it comes to the sequencing portion of System 63, you'll notice that a lot of these oscillators, VCOs, the synth modules, they all have 2 volt per octave inputs. That's basically so you can take your volt per octave out from your clock, which you use as a base tone, and then CV out from your sequencer, which is what moves you up and down within a 2 octave range usually. And we also have gate out from the sequencer. Now we have our outputs. We're going to just bring these over really quick. And the A is the audio out. So there we have completed our first sequence. Let's drop this back over to clock. And it'll run just as is. You can adjust things like the frequency on the... Now, because everything is volt per octave in System 63, you can also take that CV output, which is now running our sequence pitch, also over to the CV input on here, and use that for modulation. Now let's go over a couple of things. Actually, I need to move something. This will get fixed right here live as we're talking about it. Let's talk about some of the special things in our sequencers. Length, pretty standard, so you can set between, in this sequencer, 1 and 8 steps. Directionality. You can have it go forward. You can have your sequence run backwards. You can have it do both, which does not stop on the ends. You can have it do ends, which does stop on the ends. This one I call R side, so it's a random left or right of the current position will be the next step. And then R side 2, which is the same thing, it's just 2 out. And then we have a full-on random. Now, one thing I want to say about R side 2, and random is that if the random part of the note that's generated is the same as the current note, it will not trigger a gate again. This is true throughout all of our sequencers, so that's easy to remember. The clock divider built into the sequencers. As you can see right now, this is just standard clock divisions. You can tell that by its divider up here. So here we have 16th notes. Now, this right here turns the clock into a multiplier. So really nice, long, luxurious notes. Those nice slow backgrounds. Let's turn this back down. And this one over here is a clock doubler. It either doubles the division or doubles the multiplication. So setting it at 8, Hitting the doubler turns it into 16. At one point I plan to put in a CV control of that so you can gate control that. Now, percent trigger is another exclusive for us. The percent trigger, you set the amount of percent chance of the particular step triggering a gate. So when it's at 100 over here, all gates are triggered. But if we turn that down to like 70, or down to 50, just a way to add more randomness to your sequence. Now also over here you can do modulation of the velocity and modulation of the hold or the gate length. And that all comes in through inputs, so VM, velocity modulation, HM, hold modulation. Now let's talk about this right here, the additive portion. And while I'm thinking about this, let's save this since we've made changes. Okay, the additive portion. What additive is, it's really easier to explain by doing. So what we need first is something to add in. So we'll go down here to RC1 and we will go to CV and we'll grab the C volts. This is just a standard voltage processor, and we drag that into the add section. Now this voltage processor, this particular one, is quantized to whole notes, and we're going to set it for 1 volt. 1 volt out. So 1 volt out from the voltage processor is now coming in to the additive input on add. Now, ATG, this is the additive gate. So what we need here is something to trigger that gate. So let's just grab the old standard Moog type LFO, set that on reset, grab the pulse wave, and now we have a gate that we can control the speed on. So now if we start our sequence, you hear it running as it normally would. Now we're going to turn on the additive gate. So now, as you can see by the flashing green light, when the gate is open, our 1 volt is added into our sequence CV and sent out to our semi-modular module. And you can control the speed of the gate here. And the width of the gate. And that can be turned on and off live. These over here are step skips. And those are the same in a lot of the sequencers. Now let's look at a sequencer with a bit of a difference. We'll go in, we'll get rid of the 9608, and we'll get rid of this. Now the sequencer that we're going to load up is one of my personal favorites, the 9624. Now the reason this is different is you see it has a bunch of different outputs. So we'll connect up our clock. And we will connect up our additive gate. And now we need a few noise-making modules. So let's go in here, keep it simple, we'll use synth mods. And let's see, something's really simple. Let's use the monotroph. And we will duplicate that 3 times. So now we have three monotrophs out here, and we have our 9624 sequencer. So, volt per octave to the top 3. Now, let's explain this. Output 1, CV output 1, or CV output on the 9624 follows all 24 steps. So if we connect up this and give it this gate and connect it to our outputs, we get a sequence. Now we have a sequence that's following all 24 steps. Now, if we take CV1 out and into here, also connecting up the gate, we're just connecting up that single CV input. Now we have 3 outputs. We're going to need a mixer. So we just come into mixing in VCA's section. And what we're going to use is the 1020 oscillator mixer, which this takes a little bit of explanation. To start with, we're going to connect up our 3 outputs. And then 1, 2, 3 down. We're going to go 3rd out. Now you notice this isn't playing back. The oscillator mixer has the concept of stops. So where you want it to stop and go out, you hit that button. Now we have a mixer mixing all three outputs. Plus we have an additional 6 more potential individual mixers or attenuators, all in one unit. So now let's look at what's happening here. The first one is following all 24 steps. CV1 follows the first 8 steps. CV2 follows the second 8 steps. CV3 follows the third 8 steps. All 4 outputs follow this gating. So if we shut off one of the gates, there we are. Now that's with the additive turned on. Once again, now you not only have directionality and length for the number of steps in the sequence, or the number of steps in each row, but also in each column, as well as directionality. We also have percent trig down here. And we have a master glide, which affects all the outputs. Or we have single glides. For those single glides to work, the master needs to be completely off. So that's it. That is really the basics of the sequencing system. The only other thing I'd like to show you on this video is we'll get rid of this particular mixer and we'll throw in the more professional studio style mixing. And with that, we start with a master mix bus. And this looks complex, but once you do it a couple of times, it's not really that bad. We connect up our outputs from the master mix bus. And then we need the mix channels. Now, to keep this simple, to start with, all we're going to use is the master. So it's master left to master left and master right to master right. Now what you have is you have your 3 outputs. Now this, the master mix channel, the mix channels also have VCAs in them. So that's what these envelope inputs are for. And if you don't need the VCA functionality, I'll show you how to shut that off. Then you can also chain these. So like if we had another set of mix channels, all you do is put these back to back and connect all those up straight across. Now instead of 5 channels, you have 10 channels. Pretty simple modular mixing system and a much more modern mixing system than you'll find in a lot of modulars. So let's drop that down, and now what we've got is this switch right here switches this VCA on and off. So we're going to hit this pull up the trim on the channel, then pull up the output. This is also a stereo mixer, so you can pan it. So now we do that for all 3 channels. Pull up the trim, pull up the output. Mix it in the stereo field. I never did hook this one up. We're going to do something funky and take the 3rd CV and put it on the okay. Okay, so there's our 3. Now you'll notice we have bus A and bus B on each one of these mix channels. So let's go have a look at how they work. Let's say you'd like to add some chorus to these. Now, rather than adding a chorus for each monotrough, what we do is we go down here into the effects section, we grab our chorus, and we take A out left and right into the chorus, and then that into A left and right on the master mix bus. So now, as we bring these in, this adds the chorused sounds. You want to turn up your effect. So much like a modern mix board that allows you to add that effect in. And usually what I do here is on the B channel, on the B bus, add in my delay. Same thing, B left and right into the delay. Into the B channel. This out of the way. Once again, turn the dry wet all the way up. And now we'll add some delay to these higher ones. Alright, so that's it. Now you can use these to mute channels. A little bit easier to hear what the chorus and delay are doing. Okay. So that's really the basics. Everything else is just experimentation and getting used to how everything connects up. Like I said, the concept of VCA is pretty simple on the mix channels. We'll go ahead and do a quick explanation of how that works. Drop in one of my faves, the 303 VCO. Connect it up out of here. So we've got our volt per octave going in. Now we need an envelope to feed into that. So we'll come down to RC1, go to envelopes, and grab my standard old 409, which is just a straight up ADSR. we need a filter. One of my personal favorite filters is the 504A low pass filter. So we'll take the envelope into CV1, the CV output into CV2, audio into audio, audio into the first input, and then envelope into the envelope. Now we turn on that VCA. So, so when this is off, you see it's in VCA mode. And we still have our good mixer working on this without having to take up a bunch of extra space for VCAs and the like. Alright, I think that's it for today. If anybody has questions, make sure and ask. It's a fairly simple system once you get to using it. And yeah, you'll notice that note was holding. That's because I had my release set so long on the 409 ADSR. So if you have questions, make sure and ask. Thanks much for watching, guys.